Okay, today we're going to look at diagramming sentences. The art of diagramming sentences is a dying art, and in fact, I would submit that the widespread inability of people to correctly speak English or to write correctly is related to not diagramming sentences. The purpose of diagramming sentences is to see what the role of each word in a sentence is and to show that schematically. So we understand we have subjects, we have objects, we have modifiers. So for every sentence, there's a subject that's the actor or actors doing something or state of being, and the rest of the sentence is a predicate. So we just divide a sentence up into subject and predicate. So there's a moiety of sentence that acts as a subject, and the other moiety is the predicate. And often the subject is small and the predicate is much larger because it has all the modifiers, but not always. Sometimes the subject has more modifiers than the predicate. The predicate could be just a simple verb. But at the very least, the predicate needs to be a verb. At the very least, the subject would be a noun or pronoun. Okay, so we'll take an example of a sentence diagram. We'll take the sentence, Jack drove his car off the road. Okay, Jack is clearly the subject, and that's all there is. Just the noun Jack, the name Jack, is all that's in the subject. The verb is drove. The whole predicate is drove his car off the road, but the verb is drove. And there's an object, a direct object of the verb, and that is car. So Jack drove car. So drove is the verb, car is the direct object, but they have modifiers. There's a prepositional phrase, off the road, that modifies drove. Off is the predicate. Road is the object of the predicate. The modifies road, the object of the predicate. Now for car, car also has a modifier, that's the adjective his, which is possessive for Jack. Now, interestingly enough, put drove off the road. I have off the road, the prepositional phrase modifying drove, because it says where Jack drove his car. Now, this prepositional phrase could be moved from under drove, modifying drove, and be placed under car. And what would that mean? Well, if we have Jack drove his car and the prepositional phrase off the road under car instead of drove, what that says is which car Jack drove. Did Jack drive his car that was in the parking lot? Did Jack drive the car that was on the road? No, he drove the one that was off the road. He has a car that happens to be off the road as opposed to one that's in a garage or a parking lot, whatever. And off the road would then modify car to tell us which of Jack's cars he drove. But by putting it under drove, it tells us where Jack drove his car. He drove it off the road. So depending on what is meant by the sentence, we position the words, prepositional phrases, modifiers, and so forth to show the meaning of the particular sentence. Okay, here's another example. We have an example of a compound, what we call a compound subject, Jack and Jill. The total subject is not just Jack, but Jill as well. And we have the conjunction and. And this is how we diagram a compound subject. We make this little diagram like this with a little dotted line for the conjunction. All right, so that's the full subject, compound subject. And on the other side, we have the predicate. And the predicate is went. That's the verb. Jack and Jill are both subject of the verb went. Now, went where? So we need a modifier for went if we want to say anything about where or when they went. And so once again, we have a prepositional phrase, up the hill. Up is the preposition, hill is the object of the preposition, and once again, the is the adjective, in this case, definite article, that modifies hill. So that's how it works with diagramming sentences. We schematicize a sentence, and how we arrange the words and phrases in the diagram shows the roles that each of the phrase, each word plays in the sentence. Now, we had an example of a compound subject. We could also use a compound verb or compound predicate. We could say went and came. For example, Jack and Jill, if we want to make that a compound verb, went and came, then we could have went up the hill and came down the hill, making the predicate, putting a compound verb in the predicate. Okay, and of course, these are just examples, but when diagramming sentences, we pay attention to, I know this is probably recognizing the use of prepositional phrases is probably the one that people who speak our language have least access to or think less of. Because I notice that when I hear people speak, they use prepositions and prepositional phrases without realizing that the object of the preposition needs to be an object form. For example, if I were to diagram a sentence, she got in line ahead of me, right? I would be, if she would say, okay, that would be diagram she is a subject, then got would be the verb. Where did she get? In line would be prepositional phrase. Ahead of me would be another prepositional phrase, and it would be me, not I, because we're looking at the object form, since me would be the object of the preposition. So we don't say ahead of I, because I is subject form of the pronoun. Or if I ever said I got in line ahead of her, right? I'm the subject form, and then it's no longer she, but ahead of her, right? So that's the point. Being aware of when a pronoun is a subject and therefore in subject form, or is in a predicate and is an object, right? Object, direct object or indirect object, we have object form. Or object of a preposition, we have an object form. So that's really the point of my introducing sentence diagramming at this time, to point out the need and to show how not having the ability to diagram a sentence leaves us open to not understanding correct usage.